Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me just before we hit the 1970s. So, as with Hartnell, I thought I'd do one video dedicated to the second Doctor, whose era I have just finished. Now, around the time this video goes up, it was recently Patrick Troughton's 104th birthday. Now, that's no real milestone. He's also been dead for over 30 years, so I'm not claiming any kind of like spooky synchronicity or anything like that. It just made me wonder what he'd make of where we're at with Doctor Who if he was still around today. I mean, 104 would be a hell of an age, and if he'd not passed away in 1987, chances are he still wouldn't be here now anyway. But 93 is more plausible, isn't it? I mean, Tom Baker isn't that far off that these days. And why do I say 93? Well, it isn't just a number I've plucked out of thin air. 93 being a more plausible age means that had he lived to see 93, he feasibly could have been around for the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. Please just take a second and imagine him as the curator. Now, thanks to the impressionist Chris Thompson, we don't really need to. He's given us a good idea of what that might be like. But what if Troughton was the most senior living Doctor around the time of The Day of the Doctor? 67 is fairly young, and there's not as much time between 1987 and the show coming back in 2005 than sometimes feels. In fact, the same distance into the past now would be 2006. So even if he hadn't made 93 and been able to be the curator in The Day of the Doctor, he could have still lived to 85 and seen the show brought back with Russell T Davies and Christopher Eccleston. It's a moot point anyway. I know none of this happened, but the fact that it feels so plausible kind of makes you wonder, what if it did? But that's Doctor Who, isn't it? Steeped in time travel, enough to make us ache for the reality of it all the more. It delights and infuriates us in equal measure. It's why each Doctor will always be remembered. I was 3 when Patrick Troughton died, but that didn't stop him from becoming my absolutely favourite Doctor throughout childhood, 25 years after he played the part. This whole show is magic. We've just welcomed a new Doctor yet again, and we are currently waiting for that new Doctor's first full series. And this period of a Doctor's era is always incredibly exciting, and it's something we're very lucky to get to go through every couple of years. It wasn't always the case though. Now, the new Doctor can breeze in and make their mark in the comfortable bubble that the audience is aware that the Doctor does occasionally change his appearance. And so, this is nothing unusual. There's an inbuilt formula for new Doctor stories, and Ncuti Gatwa is the 14th actor to assume the lead in Doctor Who. Now, the higher that number gets, the less surprising and fresh the concept of regeneration becomes. Patrick Troughton had none of that. He didn't even have any foreshadowing within the show itself. The Doctor comes over all funny, collapses, and changes his face. The following week we're presented with this completely different character, looking and behaving like a far cry from the Traveller we have grown accustomed to over 3 years. It's audacious, it's bold, and it's absolutely insane. That it is now de rigueur isn't just down to it being a necessary tool in order to keep the show going, it's in no small part down to Patrick Troughton himself. He shakes things up to such an extent that the paradigm of the show shifts around him. It accommodates the new Doctor and forms into something completely different from that which we're used to. Like his performance though, enough key elements are retained. It is still recognisably the same show, just through a different lens. He is without question through a different lens, but as I've mentioned previously, he throws out enough hints that he remains recognisably the Doctor. Hartnell's performance was indelible. Almost, but obviously not quite to the point of being irreplaceable. Now, Troughton and his producers seemed wise to this, and they crafted something which isn't so much a replacement as it is a reimagining, and it works tremendously. Crucially, it seemed to make for a happier environment making the show as well. Having had a slightly adversarial relationship with William Hartnell, Innes Lloyd's time on Doctor Who seemed to be on the up with the entrance of Troughton, and that kind of came with, there's like a renewed sense of vigour for the remainder of season 4. And some might look at it and say that the ride remains quite bumpy for a bit before it gets quite comfy in the following season, and then there's sort of like another shake-up in Troughton's final year in the role. Like Hartnell before him, Troughton found facets of the Doctor which bring to the fore qualities that were to become ingrained enough for their successors to run with today. Benevolence, bravery and eccentricity are all traits which we associate with the Doctor, yet in these early days, seeing the germs of them really pack a punch. Where the first Doctor formed lovely friendships with each of his travelling companions, even when they were barely sketched beyond outlines, so too does the second Doctor, even though he had far fewer with which to do so. Having Ben and Polly around for the handover helps to sell the second Doctor as the same man, but it's how Troughton continues to form bonds with each of them which really does the job. Likewise with Jamie, who stayed almost as long as this incarnation did. Very quickly bonding a chemistry with Fraser Hines, Troughton's Doctor's relationship with Jamie ends up becoming one of the most interesting in a very, very, very long time. It's refreshing and certainly one of the most enduring Doctor-companion dynamics the show has ever had. His lovely paternal rapport with Victoria was nice to watch unfold, and even felt something of an echo to his earlier self's relationship with Vicky. However, his bond with Zoe became perhaps the strongest, and I may even go so far to say that season 6 perhaps would have worked slightly better with just the two of them sans Jamie. There is only one man who can take over, William Hartnell is reported to have said, and that man is Patrick Troughton. And on the evidence of his time in the role, that's really hard to argue with. Obviously, the casting of the Doctor is always just one person out of thousands, and we will never know, because of that one, what the other thousands would have been like. But, as with William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton's casting feels meant to be. He understands and nurtures the role and treasures it to the same degree that Billy did. It's just that their different perspectives yield different results. This has always led me to believe that each Doctor is a refraction of the actor playing them, and that's why the thorny issue of recasting certain incarnations can prove divisive. And I don't know, I've been thinking about it a lot. I might do a video on this very issue with regards to recasting certain incarnations of the Doctor for the TV show and for Big Finish, and how my own opinions on that over the years have changed quite a bit. But even though I have mellowed to the concept and even been won over by several of the recasts, part of me still very much believes that the second Doctor isn't so much the second in sequence as he is Patrick Troughton's Doctor, and without him, what would be the point? This isn't really the place to get into discussing recasting past Doctors in any detail. I'll save that for that video if I make it, but I felt it pertinent to mention here because Troughton ostensibly was, at the time, a recast of Hartnell's Doctor. Right up until he changed, there was no reason to assume that there would be other Doctors. The genius of Troughton meant that it could keep happening, and that it became something more of a recast. It was a whole new concept, and Patrick Troughton sold it so incredibly well that he will always be that Doctor. And of course, that Troughton made another Doctor means that the small issue of preference started to creep in. As soon as there was more than one Doctor, people would always have their favourite. And I'm at a point on my marathon now where both Doctors have delighted me enormously. I love them both dearly. At a push though, I think Troughton takes the gold. Only slightly, mind. Not just one of the best Doctors, but one of the very best television performances I can think of. Hartnell's legacy may actually be more sizable, but Troughton has a legacy of his own, and that is ensuring that the audience of Doctor Who accepted the concept of the Doctor's regeneration. Without it, we wouldn't be here discussing it. So, farewell then, Doctor Number 2. Your departure may not have been the emotional kick that your predecessors was. It's hard to shed a tear when you're gurning away like that, but the void you leave will be just as great. And it's a comfort when watching, knowing that Troughton elected to leave rather than being forced out like Hartnell was. It sort of makes the handover into the 70s feel triumphant, and the epic nature of his final story certainly plays into that. And while I may have had like more feels from Hartnell's regeneration into Troughton, I can't deny that the change from Troughton to Pertwee, even though we don't see it, the change from the second Doctor into the third, it does feel like there was more care given to it. I made mention of it feeling like Hartnell was bungled off through the back door and was sort of like denied the opportunity to leave through the front, arms aloft, getting all of his applause. But I do feel like Troughton had a departure that was worthy of him, and on some level he's been missed ever since. Either
there are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought.
Or his electric scene with the War Chief in episode 8 of the War Games. So we did this for Hartnell, so let's do it for the Trout fit. The wig was £6, the recorder was 14, The shirt was £7. The little bow tie was £4. I think that's actually meant to go in a little girl's hair, to be honest. But I couldn't find a bow tie that looked sort of like as droopy and as sorry as Troughton's. But luckily, I found this £4. The handkerchief was a £5, and the frock coat was £27. So that's quite extravagant, I'll grant you. So the total is £63. Which, yes, is more expensive than the Hartnell one, where I already had the jacket, so I did have to buy this sort of like oversized coat for Troughton, and that bumped it up quite a bit. Obviously, I don't have trousers for either of them, so that'll add the cost to both of them. I shoot from the waist up, but if I ever decide to sort of like give these a spin somewhere, I'll need trousers. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this appraisal of the Second Doctor, then you know how YouTube works. Please do hit the like thumb and share it around to anyone you can think of, even your grandma. She might not want to watch it, but just put it in front of her and it'll count as a view. And what are your thoughts on the Second Doctor? Is his role in assuring the future of the show as important as I've made out, or am I grossly overestimating the impact that he had? Is he one of your favourite Doctors, or does he nestle somewhere near the bottom? And how does he compare to the first Doctor for you? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a brand new era. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you back on Earth.